Greetings, how is everybody? So glad to be with you today as we talk about the proven approach for servant leaders who accept new roles. You might have memories that make you cringe when you watched other people enter the organization in a position and promptly demand respect without any hesitation. As a servant leader in a new role, do you have another approach? Can you look back to your first day in your current position? Did you meet with anybody to learn more about the mission and the team and the culture? I still remember my entrance into my first manager role. It was a new company with a culture that was in sharp contrast to my previous company. It was my first time dealing with inbound customer support. And the responsibility to hire great people who would fit into our rapidly growing organization was somewhat out of my comfort zone. I had never hired anybody before. I had chosen people to join my projects, but I'd never actually done the hiring. So how would I do my job without knowing what people did and the challenges they faced? I had seen various leaders come into our teams, and some made the transition better than others. I knew that I had to ask more questions. I asked the two experienced team leaders if I could spend most of my workday in their office just listening and observing. They both said, "Sure, please do." Those days were invaluable. Just the relationship building aspect of this time proved to become a foundation of trust. I quickly recognized these experts as essential to the function of the entire team. Since I was the new kid on the block, I stayed back far enough that I could see the daily routine. I could see how people were interacting. I could see the challenges that they were facing. I wanted to know how customers were handled, especially when their requests were difficult to solve. When they had tough questions, how did the team interact and where did they go for help? The inner workings of the support process was easiest to see when something went wrong. When everything was, ticking along just fine, it was really hard to see where the bottlenecks were. Where were our questions? How was our training? If something went wrong, I could see it very obviously. In those times, I asked my experts what my options were in responding to the customer and solving the problem without overstepping them. Now, at this point, you might be wondering how I was perceived. Why would they trust someone who didn't know everything? Now, in contrast to my teach me approach, one of my peers was hired about 30 days after me and never bothered to sit down with the team. There were multiple comments about my willingness to learn from the team and work with them very closely. From the expert role, leaders are perceived as disconnected if we do not take the time to learn about their jobs and their challenges. No one knows how to improve the daily routine better than the ones working inside that routine. The ones closest to the details can tell us as leaders what works and what doesn't and why. From systems to equipment to location to cube arrangement to anything, they are the experts at us, not those of us that are one rung away in front of them. And whatever you want to call it, we don't know all the answers. Anyone in a new role really should be asking more questions. Fewer words and more observation allowed me to decide where my role would meet theirs. As I started to read through resumes, I could determine which people would fit with the balance between experience and growth. The workforce in any given location is not limitless. I don't really care how large of a community you live in. somebody has to take the initiative to decide, how are we going to grow the workforce at the same time we're going to grow the team? So you've got to be able to decide, okay, now wait a minute. Can I actually take some non-technical people? And could they learn software support? And the methods that we were actually implementing, did I have to have really heavy-hitting technical people in the part of the organization I was in? The answer was no. Now, that didn't mean that I could take all non-technical people, but somebody somewhere in the organization was going to have to start to bring in people that we would consider novices. I hired more than one that had less than a year of experience in anything in business. And they were great people because they wanted to make it work. So whenever we're looking at hiring and we're looking at building, we always have to look at what the local workforce can withstand. And even with remote possibilities, not everybody is great at working remote. We have got to be careful. Hire people who are older, hire people that are same age, hire some people that are younger. Let's get a breadth of experience back into our workforce and never ignore people based on our own assumptions. There are great people out there. If they could carry on a conversation, I was very interested in having them on my team. Because if you can carry on a conversation and you are interesting to talk to, the customers are going to love you. They're absolutely going to say, I want to talk to this person because this person actually listens to me and this person is going to go find the answer for me. There's something to be said for tenacity over experience. So sometimes when we look for people and we say, oh, they have to have 3 years of this and 5 years of that and 7 years of that, do they? Or do we need to grow that? Not by underpaying them either. We need to pay people fairly. And then as we grow them up, they become a critical portion of an organization that can grow faster because we're not just worrying about getting the experience from other places. So I would really recommend, as we look to how we're going to put a team together, whether you're the new person on the block or not, look at a real breadth of experience, different ages, different backgrounds, different cultures. Let's bring it all together and make it work because we actually ask enough questions. Take some people's recommendations. There's lots of places that actually pay great referral bonuses to their employees. It's worth it if you don't have to go find them. So throughout the time of building the team and looking for people, I was also learning about my senior manager. Where did he stand? And what were his duties? Because it was his idea to push the existing first line managers, which was him and his peers, up one rung and put a line of first line managers underneath them. It was really, really uncomfortable for him because he was used to just going directly to the analysts, and he didn't want to do that anymore with us between him and the analysts, between him and the team leaders. So without asking questions of him, I never could have figured out how to become an effective manager who didn't do the same job as the experts and yet didn't get into his territory either. He had to figure out where he stood between the director and us. And we all asked questions and we all sat down, and yes, people's toes got stepped on, and yes, the egos were bruised. And we kind of had to say, okay, let's move on. So as the organization grew, we added more managers and experts. And the people who asked the most questions were able to contribute to the organization without stepping on toes in the analyst ranks, because we didn't want to do that either. So even the new managers who were promoted internally had challenges because they had to leave the comfort of the daily grind in the hands of others, and it was challenging. There was always that temptation for the newly promoted leader to sit down with the experts and do the same job. And since I didn't come from inside, I didn't have to worry about that. I wanted to know their jobs, but I didn't want to sit down with them. I didn't even want to access in the same way they had it. My phone didn't ring the same way. My computer didn't look at the same systems because I didn't want that stuff. I wanted them to do it. Since it was so easy for those former experts to take over the challenging issues and just take care of each one, I watched every single one of them struggle in that choice every day. The real challenge for a leader is to teach somebody else to solve the tough problems and to watch each person grow in their skills and abilities. As a newly appointed leader, I knew that I couldn't take it away. Did I have the technical skills? Yes, I did, and still do. But taking over issues for our teams is the best way to return too far into that comfort zone, and then you're trapped. I wanted my team to stand on its own, and I wanted them to come toward me instead of me coming toward them. Because as soon as I started to back up toward them, everything stopped. They knew that I was there for them. They knew that I would help them in any way that I possibly could. But all of us will encounter new roles that require us to stretch long enough to make the transition. And if we don't make the transition, we're not leading. We're actually in their way. We are literally in their way. So those who refuse to continue in that expert role will accept some of that discomfort in the quest to move obstacles and train the team to handle the daily routine. It's harder than it looks, because we all want to know we can succeed in things. As a new leader, in a position that you're not comfortable with, don't go back to the comfort zone. Because if you do, that's where you can really step on toes. You can really insult them because they don't think you believe in them. As a servant leader, your initial approach to every position can build trust faster than you can imagine. Ask more questions of those experts who know how to handle the details, and remember to ask them how you can help them. Our job as leaders is to trust them to do the details every day. Ask questions. Thank you for listening. Have a great day. We'll see you soon. Take care.